Hello Divination and welcome. In today's tutorial, I'm going to go through 7 techniques to achieve clean and abstract designs with Divi. So these are the final designs we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. Okay, so right now I'm in my admin dashboard. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here to pages, click on add new, and then you're just going to call this page tips. Click on use the Divi builder, and then I'm going to click on the visual builder. Now, when it comes to the page name, you can choose whatever name of your choice. And then over here, now that the builder has loaded, we're going to choose build from scratch. So I'm going to select that. And for our column structure, we're going to need 1 column. Great. So the next thing we need to do now is to add our background image and add our pattern to our row. So I'm going to come over here to my row settings, click on background, and then I'm going to select my third tab. Okay, so this is so I can add my background image. So I'm going to click this plus button here, click on media library. So I already have my image in my media library, but if you want to use the same image, it can be downloaded from the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. So I'm going to select my image, upload an image. So now we can see our image is in the background. And then over here, we just need to make sure that our background image size needs to be set to fit. And then over here, it needs to be centered and no repeat. So, okay, that's looking great. Now we need to adjust the sizing. So I'm going to come over here to the design tab, click on sizing, and we need to make sure that we set this to make this row full width. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and save, and then we're going to add our first module. So I'm going to click this plus button here and search for my text module. Click on text. So for our text, we're just going to call this clean and white. Next, we need to come over here to the background and add our background color, and this is going to be white. And then we need to move over here to the design tab and make our design changes to our text. So first of all, I'm going to come over here to my text. We're going to make this bold. So I'm going to click this drop down on the font weight, click on bold, and the font style needs to be uppercase, and the text color needs to be black, and the size needs to be set to 18. Now, let's move on to letter spacing. So for the letter spacing here, we're going to set this to about 29, like that. And for the mobile device, we're going to set it at 25 and then 18. So I'm going to click this little icon here. So here we need to set this at 25. And then for the smartphone, it needs to be set to 18. Great. So now that we have that in place, our text orientation needs to be set to centered. So I'm going to click here to center everything. Now it's time to go to adjust the spacing. So I'm going to come over here to spacing, and for the margin top, we're going to set this to 100. So that looks great for now. I'm going to go ahead now and save. Now it's time to add our second module. So I'm going to come over here. So as we can see, my plus button here to add my module is being covered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come all the way to the bottom here, click on expand settings, and then I'm going to go into my wireframe mode. Now I have the ability to add my text module. So I'm just going to add it by clicking this plus button and searching for it and then select it. Now that I have all this set, I can go back now to my desktop mode. Great. So here I'm going to add my text. So we're just going to call this design. Now let's go to the text, to the design settings, click on the text, and we're going to change this from regular to ultra bold. And for the text color, we're going to make it black as we did before. And for the text size, we're going to set this to 200. Now, we might as well adjust our sizes for our mobile devices. So I'm going to click this little icon here and set our tablet size to 130. And for our smartphone, this needs to be set to 100. So as you can see in our 3 modes, now our text is nice and easy to read. But we're not done yet, because we need to go ahead now and add letter spacing, and this time we're going to add -6. And for the line height, we're going to set this to 1 EM. For the text orientation, we're going to set this to centered so that it's just below this top text. Okay, so we're done with that now. Let's go ahead and save, and we're going to add our last module, and this is going to be our button module. So again, I'm going to come over here to my wireframe view, click this plus button and add my button module, and then click back over here to the desktop view. So first of all, we're going to add the text for the button. So for the text, we're just going to say learn more. And then for the link, for now, I'm just going to add a blank link. And then next, we need to customize this button by going into the design tab, clicking on button and activating use custom styles for button. So the first thing we're going to do is to center this button because right now it's all the way there to the left. So I'm going to click on alignment and then center it. Now let's go back into the custom styles. So first of all, our button's text size needs to be set at 16. Our button text color needs to be set to white. Now the reason why we're doing this is because we are going to be adding a gradient to our button. So right now it looks like it's disappeared, but we are going to sort it out soon. Right, so for the background color, we need to add a gradient. So this time we're going to go into the second tab right here, click this plus button, and we're going to add our first color. Now, if you want to use the same color as I'm using in this tutorial, you can go to the link which I will add to in the show notes below. Okay, so that's my first color. I'm going to click the second color here and paste my color, just like that. Next, for the gradient direction, we need to set this to 153. Right, so moving on, we have here this button border width set at 2. We need to make sure we get rid of all that and set it to 0. For the button border radius, this needs to be set at 54. So now we can see that we've just changed the style of our button just by adding our border radius. Now it's time to adjust our font weight. So I'm going to come over here and click this drop down and set our font weight to ultra bold. And for the font style, we're going to set this to uppercase. Now the next stage is to add some padding and also some margin. So I'm going to click here on the spacing. And for the margin, I'm going to add 100 pixels to the top. And for the padding, I'm going to add 15 to the padding top and bottom. So one quick way of doing this, because the same value is going to be added to the top and the bottom, is to activate this chain. And then I'm going to just add my 15 pixels and this will be applied to both top and the bottom. Right, so over here, again, we're going to need to add our left and right padding, and this is going to be 40 pixels. So again, I'm going to activate the chain and add my value just like that. Now it's time to go to the box shadow. So I'm going to click here on the box shadow, and my style I'm going to choose is this one right here. And for my box shadow blur strength, I'm going to set this to 80. And then next, for my spread strength, I'm going to set this to -7. And finally, for our box shadow background color, I'm going to add an RGBA value. So I'm just going to click here on the eyedropper tool, and I'm just going to paste my value within the brackets. And then I'm going to go ahead and save. So as you can see, we have managed to create a design which is both clean and very simple. Now let's add additional steps to this design. So what I'm going to do here is to add a new row. So I'm going to click this plus button here, and we're going to need a single column. Close this for now. And then I'm going to go into the row settings and make sure that this is set to full width. So I'm going to click on the design tab, sizing, and set this to full width. On the custom gutter width, we're going to set this to 1. So we need to activate it first by clicking here and then just sliding the slider until we get to 1. So with that done, I'm going to save, and then we're going to add a module. In fact, it needs to be a divider module into this row. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my divider, select it. So the first thing we need to do here is to disable the show divider. So now it's set to no. And now we need to add a gradient background. So I'm going to click here on the background. And because it's a gradient, we need to click on the second tab, click the plus button here, and I'm going to add my first color. And as I mentioned before, if you want to use the same colors as I'm using in this tutorial, please go ahead and click the link, which I'll provide in the show notes below. Okay, so I'm going to paste my value like that. And then for the gradient direction, this needs to be set at 168. So I'm just going to add it here. Now it's time to go to the spacing. So I'm going to click here on the spacing, and for the margin top, I'm going to set this to -400. So now we can see that this line has been shifted into this top row. So what you can do here if this is not positioned correctly is to go in and make further adjustments. Now, because our monitors may differ, but in my case, I may need to play around with this until I get the size that I need. So right now it works for me at minus 300 pixels. But as I mentioned, you may need to make a few adjustments. Now let's go to opacity. So I'm going to click here on the filters and we are going to reduce the intensity of this line. So as I'm dragging, you can see that this opacity is actually adding a great design. So I'm just going to bring it down here to about 43%. But as I mentioned, you can always adjust this to what looks right for your design. And then now it's time to go into the box shadow. So I'm going to click here on box shadow, choose my style. So for the blur strength, I'm going to set it to 80. Next, for the spread strength, I'm going to set it to 3. And then finally, my shadow color, I'm just going to paste my values between the brackets, just like that. Right, so I think we're done here. So I'm going to go ahead now and save. So let's continue with our design. So what I'm going to do to make things easier for me is I'm just going to duplicate this whole section like that, and then start working on this top one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some adjustments to my text settings. So the text module I need is the top one. So I'm going to click here on the settings, and then I'm going to switch back to my desktop view and then click on design. So what I need to do first here is to adjust my margin. So I'm going to click here on spacing. So already we have 100 pixels to the top. So for the bottom, we need to add 150. But this needs to be applied to the smartphone. Okay, like that. Okay, so back over here to the desktop. We also need to change the spacing of the text module number 2. So I'm going to save this for now. Go back into my wireframe view. Select my text module, design, and then sizing. So this, for spacing. And then this time I need to go into the tablet view. So I'm going to click here on the tablet. And this needs to be set at 150 to the bottom, like that. Right, so I'm going to go ahead now and save. So now we need to change the button color. So I'm going to go in here and click on this gear icon to enter my button settings. Click on design, button. So first off, we need to change the text color. So I'm going to come over here. So right now it's set to white. Let's change it to this color right here, like that. Next, we're going to remove this gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And right now you can see we don't have a button background color. So let's add a background color. So I'm going to click here on this bucket tool and then click this plus button to add our background color. And our color here is going to be white. So as you can see, this is now really standing out. So for now, let's go ahead and save. And the next thing we need to do now is to add a new section. So I'm going to come over here and click this plus button. So this is going to be a regular section. I'm just going to close this for now. And then I'm going to go into my section settings. So what I'm going to start off doing is by adding our gradient. So I'm going to come over here to my background, click this second tab and click this plus button. So my first color here is going to be pasted here. It's a hexadecimal value. I'm going to add my second color like that. And then finally, I need to adjust my gradient direction, and this needs to be set at 165 like that. Great. Now let's carry on by adding a divider. So I'm going to come over here to the design tab, click on dividers, and the divider we need is the top divider. But before we add the style, we just need to make sure our divider color is set to white. And now I'm going to choose my divider style. And the one I'm going to go with is this one right here, like that. So the next stage is to add my bottom divider. So again, I'm going to add my color. It's going to be white. And I'm going to choose my style like that. So the next thing we need to do is to modify our spacing settings. So I'm going to come over here to spacings. And for my top margin, I'm going to set it to minus 460. Like that. But as I mentioned before, you may need to play around with this until you get the right size. So I'm just going to bring this down to maybe 360. Okay, so let's start off with 360 for now, and then we're going to make further adjustments. So over here for the margin bottom, we're going to set this to 100. So I'm going to save for now. And right now we see that we have this row that we added earlier on. Let's get rid of it. So right now I can't really see where it is. So I'm going to come over here to my wireframe view, and then I'm going to delete this completely. Okay, so now back to our desktop view. Now we can see that our design really looks nice. So what we need to do finally here is to go back in and add our padding. So I'm going to click here on the section settings, design, spacing, And for the custom padding, I'm going to add 0 to the top and the bottom. Now that looks great. So one more thing you can also do here is you can see here that the height can be adjusted by coming over here to divide the height. So you can play around it like that. So you can tweak this until you're happy with how it looks. Okay. So I thought I'd just mention that here. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.